he would know which one Shakespeare wrote. It's very clear. So are you telling me, for the sake of argument, let's say there are 3,000 religions on earth. If one is from Allah, and 2,999 are a combination of being from devils, from con men, and all kinds of other things, I can't tell which is the one from Allah versus the one written by a devil or a con man or what have you. It can't be that the work of Allah looks just like the work of the devil. And I know a lot of people are confused and they think, well, who knows who has the truth? And Muslims are very sure of who has the truth, because we looked at it analytically. And one of my personal, I'm sharing a personal thing with you, one of my favorite and personal things in Islam is that the Quran calls you to contemplate the Quran itself. Contemplate this book itself. Could it have been written by a human being? Or is it strong enough to help you so you can safely and accurately assume or claim that it was written, that it was from Allah Azza wa Jalla, that it has no contradictions whatsoever, that it has no discrepancies, that it has no solutions for problems that the solutions don't work themselves. So the Quran calls us to think and to contemplate. And the Muslims in the room right now, the majority of them, if not all, they have contemplated and they're sure of the clear truth that stands out. And that's why there are so many people who read the Quran and they immediately recognize that it's not a normal book, that it couldn't have been written by man. And there's so many things, and this is not the time for it, nor does the time permit, so many things that if you stack them one on top of the other, you will see that it's impossible for any human being, no matter how brilliant, to have written such a book 1,400 years ago. Now this, to some of you, might seem like an outrageous claim, but the answer is very simple. There are Qurans and they're free at the back of the room on these tables. I'm telling you it is the book of Allah and it has absolutely no mistakes. So it would seem that it's easy for you to disprove me, and so that means then the test lies in you getting a copy of the Quran and reading it and looking at it analytically. Does this look like the writing of a normal human being? And so, perhaps it's best to start to conclude. And I would like to mention again the most important things in Islam. And if these most important things that I'm going to mention, they don't cause you any friction, and if they agree with you, you basically have the ingredients of what it takes to become a Muslim. The first and most important thing in the Quran, and because it's the most important message in the Quran, you will find it on every single page of the book, that there is only one God, and He is the only one that should be worshipped. The worst sin is to worship something besides Him, or to worship something alongside with Him. So that is the number one thing. So these are called the 5 pillars of Islam, and as you know, pillars are what hold up a foundation. So these are what hold up Islam. One, that there is only one God worthy of worship, nothing else should be worshipped, and nothing else is worthy of worship. And that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is His servant and His messenger. Not His right-hand man, not His helper, not an angel, His servant and His messenger. And He is a man who came with the same message of all the prophets before Him. All the prophets, whether you look at them in the Old Testament or the New Testament, or whether you look at the stories of the prophets through the Quran, you will find that all of them call to the worship of one God. And this has been mentioned so many times in the Old Testament. All you have to do is just go to Bible.com and just look up the word idols and see how many times God will threaten, and that is the accurate word, threaten David and Solomon and the people and the prophets and nations from worshipping something besides Him. So that's a message that you find consistently throughout the Old Testament. Then you look at the message of Jesus, and He also didn't change the 10 commandments, the most important things: you honor your parents, you're good to your neighbors, you don't steal, you don't lie. But they asked Him, what is the first commandment? And He said, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord." If you look at all the sentences spoken by Jesus in the Bible, just what Jesus said, not what people explained, you will find constantly and consistently that He is calling people to worship God. Not once does He clearly or explicitly say you need to worship. Not once. He says, and worship the Father who is in heaven. A woman calls him good teacher. Why callest thou me good? Why do you call me good? It's only the Father who is good. So you don't walk away with the message that he was the third Godhead or that he needs to be worshipped. Not explicitly. You will find vague hints to the Trinity. But vague hints cannot be acceptable when it comes to the most important message. The most important message in the Quran is the oneness of Allah. It's on every single page of the book. If I give you a booklet, how to fix a flat tire, you read the whole thing, it has to address the topic, how to fix a flat tire, clearly and explicitly. But what if you read the whole thing and there's only a hint, a vague hint to how to fix a flat tire? That doesn't work. So how can it be that the most important message is whatever it is, John 3:16, or the propitiation of the Lord's anger through the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, or whatever? How can that be the most important message, that he is divine and he came to die for people's sins, but it's not there clearly and explicitly? How many times did he give speeches on the roadside, in people's homes, in the temple? How many times did he give sermons? Not once did he say, listen up people, it's very clear, I am the third Godhead, I am divine, you need to worship me. So the message has to be clear and explicit, and you cannot accept vague hints to Trinity, because it's the most important message. It cannot be vaguely alluded to. It has to be clearly mentioned. And so when you look at the teachings of the Old Testament, and you look at the teachings of the New Testament, you find constantly that there is one God. I am your Lord, besides me there is no God. And then you look at the message of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and it's the same exact message. The Ten Commandments don't change, and it's one God that is worthy of worship. And you find that the Quran mentions all the other prophets, and mentions their names, and mentions the events in their lives. And if this book were written by an impostor who pretended to be a prophet, then he would spend the majority of the book talking about how great he was, and talking about himself, and not talking about other prophets. Jesus is one of the top 5 of the greatest prophets in Islam. And it's no joke, and you cannot pick and choose from issues of belief. Islam is very strict in issues of belief, more flexible in issues of dealings and worship. In issues of belief, it's very strict. Out of the 1.2 billion Muslims on earth, if one of them today stood up and said, I don't believe in Jesus, or I believe in all the prophets, but I don't like Solomon, then he's not a Muslim, or she's not a Muslim anymore. It's not like they're 98% Muslim. It takes them out of the fold of Islam. So, an impostor, why would he make that a stipulation in his made-up religion? That you have to believe in these other men who came, versus you just have to believe in me, which is what an impostor would do. So you find again the consistent message of one God also in the Quran. That all the prophets came from the same place. That if I were to take you back some thousands of years ago, suppose someone says, yes, this is the time of Jesus. Alright, so Jesus was right there in front of him, and he is a prophet sent by Allah to teach people. And he says, well, I choose to follow Solomon. He was a prophet of God, so I'm following Solomon. They told him, but God sent you, a prophet, right now. He's here on earth now, today. And his message is here, and he was sent for you. Yes, but I know that they came from the same place. I mean, they all came from God. So I'm just going to stick to what Solomon did. Can you ignore the prophet that Allah sent for you, even though you were following one of the prophets of Allah? Surely you were. But this one was sent now, with the new message, with the latest version. And you're going to say, no, I'm going to fall back on the old teachings. And so many people are doing that right now. Where they believe in the true message of Jesus, or they believe in the current message of Jesus, or various different messages as people interpret them differently, but they refuse to follow the new prophet that was sent to them 600 years after Jesus, with the same basic message, but some things were abrogated, and the way to pray and all these details are in the new message, but they say, no, I'm going to choose to follow this message. And that's why if you look at it, the Jews, they believed in everybody from Adam, and including Moses, Aaron, David, Solomon, Abraham, Lot, but they stop at Jesus. They don't follow, they don't believe in Jesus. But then the Christians did a better job, and they believe in everybody from Adam, including all the list of prophets we mentioned, and they believe in Jesus, but they stop at the